Hi, everyone. This is Rise San Diego, welcoming you to the Rise Now Sunrise series. There are a couple of some community guidelines we want to go over for folks as you're logging in. So for one, all the attendees, you're going to be muted, but we definitely encourage your participation utilizing either the Q&A or the chat box. We will have about 15 minutes at the end of the session to answer your questions as quickly as possible. And so if you don't know already, to open up the Q&A box, you click the Q&A icon at the top of your screen, or for some folks, it's actually at the bottom. So we will not be utilizing the raise hand or audio features during this presentation. So make sure to please ask all content related questions through the Q&A box. This webinar is also being recorded, featured on our Facebook Live. With that being said, I introduce you to Tony Young.
Thank you, Selena, and welcome everybody to our Rise Now series. And this is an important series. It's called our Sunrise series. So what we're going to do is talk about some of the issues that are important to the African American community in San Diego and maybe even throughout the state. And I would just say this: we all recognize that San Diego's African American community has experienced many forms of discrimination, and we don't have to go through the whole list of that. And one way to address some of those issues, obviously, is some of the things that you've seen out in our streets. People are protesting, people are advocating for the things that are important to them. But for a more prolonged and substantial impact, we have to make sure that the policies reflect some of the things that people are advocating out on the streets. And also, we need to find ways to be more engaged to make sure that we have a longer lasting impact. So with that, I'm really excited to have three of the prominent African Americans in our county. All three of them I highly admire and respect. And I'm looking forward to hearing what they're going to say tonight. First of all, of course, our Assembly member, Dr. Shirley Weber, who represents our region here in San Diego, in Sacramento, but also is the chair of our statewide Black Caucus. Dr. Randy Ward, who is the executive director of Teach for America, but also at one time was the superintendent for county schools here in San Diego, and also was the superintendent for the Oakland School District at one time. Major impact that he has had throughout the region. And of course, our RISE fellow, council member, Monica Montgomery, who we're very, very proud of and has done a lot of work in just a very quick amount of time. So we're just really, these are the folks who are gonna make what you've heard out on the street happen. They're going to advocate and they're going to work with us to make this happen. I say us, I'm talking about the community. But with that, first I wanted to make sure that we kind of have a temperature check of the room by doing a poll. So there's a poll question that we're going to ask you, and we want you to engage with that poll question. And you can, the panelists can answer it, but you as an audience can answer some of these questions. I'm sorry for Facebook folks, you guys can't all answer it because of, it just doesn't work like that. But online here, you can do that. So the question is, in terms of your perceptions of social, economic, and educational justice needs in San Diego's Black community, which of the following do you believe are most important to address? Racism and racial trauma continue to affect the mental well-being of the Black community. Black households have less wealth to transfer from one generation to the next. Systematic changes that will require a complete reimagining of law enforcement to end police brutality. Black children are a greater risk of being de-educated, miseducated, and forced out of the education system. And residents of impoverished and deprived areas frequently lack access to affordable and nutritious food. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to put in your selection as maybe the most important thing here to discuss and to talk about and to think about, and then we'll get to our panel. Okay, how are we doing with votes? Let's see what we came up with. Well, it's pretty even. That shows that we have a lot of stuff to deal with, and a lot of people have, have a lot of concerns, and that means that I'm certain that folks who voted for their number one choice probably just as easily could have selected the other ones. So, we'll keep that in mind. It'll help us understand and talk about some of the issues that are important to our audience. But I want to start with Dr. Weber. Dr. Weber, first of all, thank you for being here. As you remember, snotty-nosed kid who tried to work on your campaign years ago. And I would just say, I do remember that there are certain members of the community that would not support you for County Board of Supervisors simply because of being a woman, I think. And look at it, we got a vice president candidate that is a Black woman. So with that, remember that,
yeah,
Dr. Weber?
That was quite a challenge. Even in the Black community, they didn't want a woman representing them, which was really quite interesting when I ran for the Board of Supervisors. So times have changed and life changes too. So we move on to better things, and hopefully we're smarter as a result of it. I want to thank you, Tony, for inviting me to be here today on RISE. RISE has done a tremendous job in terms of raising issues and helping with the development of young people and individuals to rise really to meet the challenge of this community. And there are a lot of challenges to be met, but the good thing is that they can be met. And if we're focused and organized and intelligent about what we do, we can get some things done. I'm grateful that I've spent the last 8 years representing you in the Assembly. And I think in that 8 years, we've done some things that indicate that things can happen, that you really can, if you're persistent and hardworking, that you can get things done for this community in an unapologetic manner. And that's extremely important, that you don't have to apologize, because the Black folks and others who are poor in this community, in this nation, need help, need assistance. And we've been doing the social justice thing. As I look at the issues that you say are important, those are issues that I've been raising for the last 40 years I've been in this community, working on behalf of those who don't have a voice, who need a voice, and trying to be that voice for them. So I just wanted to hit on a couple of things, because as mentioned, I've been called to a mandatory meeting at the Capitol, and so I've got to get on that Zoom call to figure out what's going on that may be a crisis. As you know, we're in a state of crisis always right now with the pandemic and economic issues and educational issues and you name it. And so at the last minute, I got called to come to the meeting, but I told them I had to come here first. And then I'll go to that meeting. They both start at 5. But let me tell you what's happening that's important that you need to know about, that what we've done. You've seen a lot of things that I've done in terms of dealing with 392 and use of lethal force and all those things. And everybody now is figuring out that's the way to go, that people should not be using lethal force unless they absolutely have to and they're preserving their life. But let me tell you some other things that we did recently. We got ACA passed, which was an amazing piece of legislation that most folks thought we couldn't get passed. But what it does, it puts the Proposition 209 back on the ballot for us to vote. It puts the whole issue that we're struggling with in these communities, or lack of opportunity, whether it's apprenticeship programs, whether it's jobs, whether it's businesses, getting contracts in the city. We've been fighting this battle for 24 years because of Prop 209. When those were in the city council in the 90s, we had 30–40% of contracts going to women and people of color. By 2010, it was 1.5%, and we're struggling still. And the same is true in LA. LA has 2% for Latino, 2% for women, and less than 1% for Black people in the city contracting in LA. So this is going back to where we were to talk about equal opportunity and access, talking about developing programs for our children. Our Black male program that we did in the 90s to help young men succeed had to be stopped because of Prop 209, because it focused upon Black kids. And so what has happened is this will be on the ballot. This will be Proposition 16. We finally got it on the ballot. It took 2/3 vote in the Assembly and the Senate. Major effort. I was chairing that particular ballot measure, and we got it on. And so now it is on the ballot as Prop 16. Want to let you know that your Chamber of Commerce this morning endorsed it and supporting the Prop 16. So that's a major piece for the Chamber of Commerce of San Diego to basically, yes, Chamber of Commerce. In San Diego, the white Chamber of Commerce in San Diego voted this morning to support Prop 16. I want you to understand that. I was at the meeting this morning arguing against Ward Connerly, who was also there. And so, so we got this, the chamber, our chamber has endorsed it, the LA chamber has endorsed it, the University of California, the CSU, all these folks realized that 24 years ago we made a mistake. And so now we need to correct that error. And so we're excited about it, but we're pushing to make sure everybody gets to the ballot and vote. So that's gonna be important. AB 3121, another bill of mine, it deals with reparations. We've been talking about reparations at the national level forever. HR 40 has failed time and time again. 3121 is in its final stage. It has gotten out of every committee. The governor is excited about it. He's helping to restructure the committee. And when this gets out of the Senate, it is going to basically be the bill that basically studies reparation and what we need to do to repair the damage of slavery in California. California was not a slave state, but it allowed slavery to exist and to make money on slavery, and it allowed people to bring slaves here to California, and we insured slaves. Our insurance company made a lot of money on slavery. And so this commission, this 9-person commission, will be the first commission in the country that will be a state commission that will focus upon the damage done not only in slavery, but since slavery to African Americans in California, and what California needs to do to repair that damage. And that will be significant. That will be very significant for us. We hope to be able to pull in the researchers and the folks from UC, the UC campuses, and to really make this a major piece. You will get information on it, and we will have hearings across the state to share with you the research and the information that's there. So this will be powerful for us. We will be basically, hopefully, the example for the rest of the nation with regards to repreration in the nation.
Like, Assemblymember, what would that look like? I mean, is everybody
everybody's hopefully it will not result in just a check. Okay. It might result in our children who qualify being admitted to the University of California first. Okay, it could result in us looking at how the banks have redlined us and create opportunities and resources for us to buy homes because we're not homeowners. So we have less wealth than any other group. It may result in basically repairing our communities because of the redlining that has occurred and the lack of business opportunities and those kinds of things. So we're asking for an in-depth discussion of what damage has been done to African Americans, who profited from it, and how do we repair that damage? How do we make Black folks whole? That's the question in California. And so we're going to be looking at that, and it will be, and so we're not just saying everybody gets $20,000 and go away. No, we're not saying that. We're saying that this damage has been compounded over years. Educational system, we may need to look at the rules that govern our educational system that keep our schools struggling with lack of qualified teachers or teachers with experience and so forth and so on. So we're not telling them exactly what to do, but we're bringing together a group of scholars who can look at this from a variety of points of view, who will then be focused on California, African Americans, the impact of slavery in California, and what needs to happen in order to repair the damage that has been done to African Americans over the last over 150 years or more. So we're excited about that. There are a lot of other things we're doing in terms of our schools, making sure that the funding that's supposed to go to our schools, 1835, Bill 1835 is holding them accountable for money that they've been skimming off the top for poor kids who they should be giving to money. And that bill demands now that they have to give it to them, and they must use it for those students and those students only. So the Black Caucus has an ambitious agenda with regard to not only those bills, but we have a number of bills dealing with social justice issues, the duty to report, the duty to intervene. So if a police officer sees something, he has a responsibility to intervene so that you don't have the George Floyd situation of 3 cops watching another cop kill somebody. Those kinds of things, we have a number of those. We have a statewide bill to deal with the carotid restraint. You've dealt with it here locally, but we have a statewide bill to deal with carotid restraint. The Black Caucus's website has a list of all of our major bills that are on it if you want to look at it to see what bills are there, what's moving. But like I said, the most important thing that you can do right now is Prop 16. Get organized, and you can look for yes on Prop 16. It's on .com. That bill is there, and we are organizing statewide, tremendous organization, tremendous support that's coming in from all around the state. All of our elected officials in terms of senators and mayors of LA and all around have all signed on to Prop 16. We need to vote. It's only 50% plus 1. Despite the fact it took 2/3 to get out of the House, it only requires 50% plus 1 to change the history of California and determine what we're going to do so that the programs that you're thinking of, the programs that others are talking about, those things can become reality. Right now, anything you think of that you can do to help Black people can be turned around and invalidated because of Prop 209. And that's what has happened over the last 24 years. So now we have the opportunity to reverse that law, to ban Prop 209, and basically create opportunities for those in our community who have traditionally been left out, discriminated against, and not given an opportunity to go and to develop.
So Dr. Weber, first of all, I looked at the Black Caucus's platform, and you all have things on housing, health, all types of issues. But I kind of want to hit on Prop 209 because I think it hits both of these, the areas that Dr. Ward and Monica Montgomery, Councilmember Montgomery, actually will deal with at some point. And I'm really interested in how they might feel about the impact something like this might have on either city government, the work that you all do, Councilmember, or Randy, of course, your experience in education. I mean, how can we support, if you do support, how do we support Dr. Weber in this, and how would that impact your issues?
So, hello everyone. I am very excited about Prop 16. I can tell you that I grew up with in a household with an entrepreneur. My father owns a construction company, and at one time, pre-Prop 209, he was doing well, you know, trying to build wealth for his family, generational wealth, very talented and skilled in what he does. And as soon as Prop 209 hit, I can remember my mom going down to City Hall and doing public comment on it, and it bringing tears to her eyes, because at that point she did not have resources and ways to get us through college, because it was right around that time. And so I have been personally impacted by the effect of Prop 209 going into play here in California. And I remember it vividly, that especially in construction, but in any industry in San Diego, we have good old boys systems. And so that will feed itself unless it is forced and mandated to do otherwise. And that's exactly what happened. My father didn't lose contracts because he wasn't skilled. He lost contracts because he was not a part of that good old boy system. And so we have to mandate it. We have to make people do right. And that's what the law is supposed to do. And that's really the only way in all of these conversations, the policy, the law, that's the only way we can help to try to turn it around and make this America that it's supposed to be.
I'm thinking
get out of here. Yeah.
Yeah. And just so you all know, Dr. Weber's staff and individuals from the Black Caucus are going to be a part of this conversation that will represent her as she's here. So we're going to keep going. But Dr. Weber, we appreciate you. Thank you. And, you know, it's really great to see you.
Thank you, Dr. Weber.
So we have Janelle and Edmund Perkins from the state capitol who are going to be on. Janelle, you can jump on anytime. Edmund, you can jump on anytime. Dr. Ward, what will be the impact for education in regards to
well, first of all,
Prop 209 and maybe some of the other things?
Yeah, I'm, you know, it's always an honor to be on here with two great people who care about our community, and Dr. Weber continuously fighting the fight. So I promise to speak well about her behind her back. You know, it's very exciting in terms of how these two overlap. I don't think one or the other is should be taken out of context and separately. Can you imagine what more opportunities for the Black and people of color that would be offered by Prop 16 throughout all the mechanisms of our classic obstacles, including education? But what about the thought of reparations through education? What about the thoughts of reparations through tuition and those kinds of things in education and support in education? I mean, there are all kinds of things that could happen that would allow our community, our children, and our families to be able to send their children into schools and get the education they need. And as we all know, education really is a true equalizer that all of us have, you know, fortunately on this panel, but we also understand that not everyone has that opportunity.
Yeah, And oh, I want to welcome Janelle Jackson, who is a consultant for the Black Caucus in California. So thank you, Janelle, for being here and filling in for
Hi, Janelle.
Dr. Weber. And we have another representative from Dr. Weber's staff, and we appreciate you being here too, sir. So what's going on in the city of San Diego? Obviously, you hear there's a whole platform in regards to African Americans in the state of California. Council member, I know where you come from. I know what you're about, and I see you every day do your work, but what do you see are the most important issues that are affecting us, and how do we address those?
Can I just address the reparations real quick? I'd
love to hear what you have to say on that.
And this all ties into what, how we're going to develop as a city. But I really, this did not hit me. I believe in reparations, but it didn't really hit me until I heard a descendant of the Tulsa, Oklahoma bombing, whose grandparents or great-grandparents had built businesses that were completely destroyed there. And when I heard him talk about how he has lost his whole inheritance based on that, then I don't feel bad about taking a check. I want the check, I want the money, the education, I want everything. And I don't think we should feel bad for addressing it with capital. Because we have lost so much capital. We were here, we worked for free for a long, long, long time. And so I know that is not everything, but I also don't think that we should feel bad if that is a part of the package, because we deserve that as well.
You think it'll be a city issue at some point? Now, obviously the state of California is taking this on as a discussion, but how does it trickle down to the education system, Dr. Ward, and the city of San Diego? How would reparations work that way, or should we just let the state focus on that?
Well, I think the state will focus on the bigger picture, but we can look at our statistics right now and see where it can be plugged in. It's all the things that Dr. Ward talked about and Dr. Weber talked about with regard to our situation with contracts. We pay into a system that we cannot then get out of, output from that system. So we are taxpayers, and then we are, the door is shut on our businesses. And so that is definitely a way to look at it. We are launching the Race and Equity Office at the City of San Diego. That has attached to it a community equity fund.
Congratulations on that, by the way, Council Member.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, those are smaller solutions. I think reparations is the true systemic change. And I think it can be, the Office of Race and Equity can be weaved into that larger picture, but we are getting set up for these things. If Prop 16 passes, then the Race and Equity Office will absolutely be able to deal with that and then start to change the policies within the city that have affected Black communities for so long. So.
Well, Dr. Ward, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
The fact is that I want to go towards the higher education, thinking around that and what could happen there. But the issue is we have to make sure our children in K-12 and pre-K-12 get what they need to be successful in higher education. We can't just put them in there if they're not going to be successful. So there's ways to use reparation for preschools and universal preschool care, so that the minds of our children below 5 years old, as you know, that's when they're all growing and their brains are growing. Those are the things that we should be looking at in terms of reparation. While I agree with Council Member Montgomery around, the capital, I'm a firm believer of, rather than giving people fish, you teach them how to fish. And so if we do more of that, then we will create a generational capacity to go out on our own and to do things for ourselves. So if you consider the preschool needs and the K-12 needs, look at how many students we have in this system. There's 508,000 San Diego County students in our K-12 education. Roughly 5, 6, 7% are African American. And so that's about 25, 30,000 students out there. But if you consider that 52% of all the 508,000 students are free and reduced lunch students, which means they come from households that earn a certain level, low income, those students are, last year, pre-pandemic, of which I have two myself. My two kids go to public schools here in San Diego. I have a senior this year and a junior. Last year, they were getting 6 hours of instruction plus a lunch period. This year, they're going to be getting 3 hours of instruction with no lunch, unless it's the meal's getting picked up. And so, and if you look at a recent study from Annenberg that just put out in May that talked about how exponentially they're losing ground in academics, social emotional learning, etc., because people don't realize by the time we start school again, our kids will have been off almost 6 months, almost the entire half a year.
Yeah.
And we can't call what they got in terms of called distance learning, we can't call that education.
You guys really want to go for this. So I thought we were just going to have a little quick conversation about this. We really have to talk about this because, obviously impacts all over when it comes to COVID-19 and some of the other things that Dr. Weber talked about. But now that we're here, you talked about the education issue. Obviously, Councilmember Montgomery, the City Council is not over education. But as you can see right now, as we talk about today, they are, the people that you represent are very impacted by how the education system is operating. And I'm not even sure how you view your role there, and how do you partner with somebody like Dr. Ward, who's so knowledgeable about the issue, to use your position to make that happen or change some of the things that are happening?
Yeah, I represent parents, so
Yeah.
I don't have any voting power over a lot of those issues, but it's still important. And I don't think that we should silo ourselves, but we should also manage the expectations of community about, what we can and cannot do. But I always acknowledge that this is probably the most important issue, really, if you talk to families, that, is on the top of their mind. And so one thing we are doing at the city that we were able to pass this year's in the ballot measure for district-only elections is coming up in November. And so what that does is it concentrates the representative to a district-only election as opposed to a citywide election. You have to do a lot more in a citywide election. That part of our San Diego City Charter was put in place in 1931, I believe, where our population as an entire city was a little over 100,000 people. Now we're at 1.4 million. And to run a citywide race, to have to engage that many voters, it really knocks a lot of people who are very much qualified out of the running, because as we know, politics, there's that part of it, that you have to mount a campaign and reach as many people as you can. So I really think that will I'm hopeful that will fundamentally change the board. I also believe that, the board, and I don't have any decision-making power over this, but it is important that there are not just figureheads behind the administration, and so the things that we can do to help that, I'm not sure, but I think it's a start to have the district-only elections, and that's something that the city did have the power to put on the ballot.
Yeah, I think you're right, and some folks don't know that the school district is in the city charter, right? So that's why the city of San Diego's council can make decisions in some way affect the structure of the education system here in San Diego, at least, and also make an impact, like you said, change the district-wide elections. So, that's really important to know. And, I think as we move forward, that's the kind of relationship that I think residents are looking for, is that we have a city council member, we have educational leaders actually working together to move forward. So I do want to make sure that from a council member's perspective, are there any other things that you think are really important that we should be focused on when it comes to a Black agenda?
I think we have to still go back to the facts. And the facts are that 29% of the people that are homeless in our city are Black, while we only occupy almost 4% of the population. We have right now 0% contracts going to Black folks, or it could be like 0.1 or something like that, but it's a very low number. We did a pay equity audit where it basically said that for every 59 cents a Black woman makes, and it's about 94 cents for a white man at the city of San Diego. And so these are all things that we're going to be working on in the Race and Equity Office. I didn't even talk about policing yet, which those statistics are damning as well. If you're Black in San Diego, you're 219% more likely to be pulled over than your white counterpart. So, you know, this was a very sunny place, but there's a lot of darkness here, and there's a lot of things that need to come up to the surface so that we can deal with them instead of trying to hide them. And so we're working on all of those things. And like you said, it's been about 19 months. It's hard when going through COVID and going through, you know, disinvestment, you know, over the years. But, you know, we're working at it, and we're really trying to right all of these wrongs. Statistics do not lie. And this lets us know that this is an intentional effort. So we have to change that effort so that we're intentionally including people instead of intentionally leaving them out. So
yeah, you know, and I agree with you, Dr. Ward. Listening to the council member who I actually, you know, had that position at some point in time a while back, and I know the pressure that she's dealing with, especially with COVID-19. But one of the things that we found at City Hall is that, you know, there's one thing about individuals who might not be supportive of our community, find ways to either block or hinder some of the progress that are happening. But some of the more difficult issues are the ones that these issues are baked in. The policy is baked in. So the council member could advocate on the dais and advocate for certain things. But the bottom line is that council policy -- or city ordinance that has already been voted in, and the people who are interested in changing it don't always have the votes on council. So are there any other issues that are baked into education policy that need to be changed before elected officials can make any change at the dais?
Well, you know, I think that Councilmember Montgomery is right on target with the changing of the charter. Because what that does is what was created before is a community would say, we want X person. And they would take the two X people that got the highest votes, right, council member? And then they would have the rest of the city decide who their representation was. That is ludicrous.
Yes.
And then to believe, and then to understand that all the special interests with all the money around who they want to represent your district is a crime, and it's a crime that it's lasted this long.
And it was purposeful, Dr. Ward. They put that in there.
As purposeful as redlining and all the rest, which meant that when you redline, then certain people are put in certain neighborhoods. And back in the day, that's where you went to school. You went to school to your neighborhood school. And remember, the choice and the choosing which school to go to, that's new in terms of the hundreds of years we've been trying to educate children. Otherwise, you went to that school. So they purposely put you in that school. And where I grew up in Roxbury, in which I fondly call the ghetto of Boston, it was the exact same way. And when I got out of college, they wanted me to live in one neighborhood. That's all they showed me. That's what the real estate people showed me. And so that's how you get trapped into that. The other piece is that many times those neighborhoods don't have the resources that other neighborhoods have. So what we're finding now is that, and this may be an area that the city can help with, is they're not called new schools, but they are schools. And they're popping up, they're called day camps, and they're called pods. By pods, I mean collection of students and families that want to increase the education of their children. So they have to pay people to come in and help kids with distance learning. Now that's happening all over the county in communities that have money, because they literally can pay for the teacher, the paraprofessional, et cetera, while they go to work they have childcare that's being paid for through their private resources. And so these are the kinds of things that we don't see, but the inequities that exist in right next door, so to speak, from neighborhood to neighborhood.
So what you're saying is if things, the potential is if things remain, maybe not go back to where they were, which is not a really great place in education for Black folks, but there's a potential that this new iteration of what education looks like could even be more harmful.
Oh, it's going to break the gap wide open, wide open. Here you have many of our students, not all, I don't want to generalize, but the fact is that many of our students, they need more education, more time. They need better education. They need more individualized education. And what we're getting now is less time and poor quality. And that speaks to the gap that will, you know, we can have all the Prop 16 we want, but if our children aren't able to take advantage of universities and colleges, et cetera, because they've been poorly educated and underperforming, then just pushing them into a college course won't make them successful.
Yeah. Well, this is what I would say. I mean, obviously, these things have been around for a while, right? And they change, different iterations. Something has to be different this time. And I know this is a difficult question, right? How do we, as a community, translate what's happening out in the streets? Because I agree, and RISE, as many of these folks are from RISE, who are out there advocating for things. How do we transfer that into addressing these issues that, you know, maybe some of these folks who are out there know generally, or maybe they don't really know all the specifics. How do we translate that?
Well, it is a tough question, but I will give you two examples of what I think works. First of all, as an elected official, I have to be aware and treat my community with the same respect that I treat paid lobbyists or, you know, people that are paid to do this, right? And because we are so bombarded, it's like the inequity that Dr. Ward talked about with the parents that are starting their own kind of schools. You have people that are paid to come and talk to us about these issues. And oftentimes community members are not, they are doing everything they're doing from their heart, right? And more than that, with expertise too, but it's a different dynamic. And when we get in those ivory towers, we tend to, if we're not aware, then we'll go with the people that are paid because they have a prettier document or what, you know. And so I think number one, as an elected official, I have to continue to stay and have the pulse of the community. Two examples of that, well, I'll give you three quick ones. One is the Community Review Board on Police Practices, the ballot measure that is trying to change it to an independent commission on police practices. That's community-led. Now, was it easy? No, and it's not over because we still got to go to the ballot. But it was not easy because I had to try my best to translate to community members what I was going through on the inside. Because it's different. And yes. Like I said, I have to have a certain amount of votes. I have to have, there are certain things just politically that, you know, I need to be effective and still get that intent through to the people. And so communication is key here. One thing, and when we went through the defund the police and the budget issues, the one thing that I said to my community when we were going through the healing process is, first of all, I came to the community for healing, number one. Number two, I said that the one thing that I would change is not necessarily my vote because I knew what it was, but my communication with the community about what was happening, what the process was, what, you know, the things that were going on. I did not do that. And so we see how that ended up, and we're working now and doing awesome things together, like we always have since I came in office. I have that special, I feel an obligation and responsibility because I do feel like the people put me in office. I did not have, I have very little institutional support. I think maybe 1 or 2 unions, but the overall labor did not support business.
I remember that campaign.
Then, so said all that to say, I have to keep that in perspective. And so the part of it is having that communication, those very, very hard conversations with community leaders, but also there has to be trust that I'm going to take what community members, activists are giving me and do my absolute best to translate that. So
yeah. No, I love that. And Dr. Word, I know you got some stuff to say because without even being elected, you are a strong advocate. And we know your record in Oakland and San Diego, the county school district, all kinds of places that I probably don't even know where the places that you've been in regards to representing. But, council member, some of the best ideas that we've heard, and I think the ethics, not the ethics, but the Department for Racial Equity was what came from ground up. It was a community, it was like an idea that came from a community member that you were able to help champion. And what we're finding at RISE is that there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of great ideas that they might not know how to translate into policy, and maybe that needs some help on that. But the fact that you understand how to listen and how to interpret that and then make it policy is really important. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah, and that's what we strive to do every day. That's very important.
Yeah, yeah. So Dr. Word, you have some thoughts, and I know you have a few.
And my heart goes out to Councilmember Montgomery because she is only one council person.
Exactly. I know your job because sometimes they look at you as the mayor and you can just, Right.
They think, but you're the city council, you should be able to do this, make this happen. And she has to collaborate and work with other council members and the mayor, and how to make that into policy requires majority vote, as far as I last remembered. And so she has to work with people, and we do too. And so part of it's kind of similar to what Councilmember Montgomery talked about. The biggest job here is awareness, and to take this on as almost as a campaign, and a campaign that talks about where are our assets in our community, what do we want in our community, similar to what you teach your leaders in RISE. How do you figure out your assets, figure out where your positives are? Don't approach your community as all negative and deficit. What they don't have, what they don't do, what they, all the problems. But to approach your community as to what are all the beautiful things about it, and how do you take those assets and work with other people inside and outside the community, philanthropists, school districts, civic and religious organizations, and create your own pathway to success. And so I think about right now, there are millions and millions of dollars of after school monies out there. There's no after school. Where's the money going? It's not being spent. There's no after school programs. And all of those after school programs, as you know, many of them were nonprofits just trying to work in schools and do various things, whether it was a athletics program, a homework program, etc. And we need to rethink how we do these things and do it on a dime. We need to pivot because our children are losing their capacity as we wait. And that is, and all the pandemic money. Why aren't we putting resources, those after school monies, do the waivers? Everybody's doing waivers now. Federal, state, waivers are not an issue because it's such a crazy time. But doing waivers so that we can start some of these day camps and pods, and I'm not talking dangerously. These families are very calculated on making sure they've isolated themselves, make sure that there's no chance of spreading of the virus, those kinds of things. And we have some schools that have childcare in the programs. So there's got to be ways to do this so that we continue to thrive, because right now our children are going further and further behind.
Yeah. Well, I would just say that we have folks in here in our chat room and also watching on Facebook that have a great idea to do. Those are great ones. But they're out there. I remember at times as a policymaker, I'd look in the audience or look around, walking through the neighborhood, and I would think there's an idea somewhere out there that can help address this issue, because they see it every day, right? They're the ones that are dealing with it. So,
and the resources are out there, Tony. The resources are out there, and people don't. It's all this pandemic money. The resources are out there, and I just want to say one last thing.
No, go ahead.
One last thing on this topic, I'm not going to stop talking. I will make sure that I do my due respect to Councilmember Montgomery. But the other issue here is, we have seen, it was written up in the Tribune, it's been known for anybody that goes to school here, is that we don't have enough people of color in education. And we have total control of that, yet there's no public will from any side, it appears, to hire people of color so that my children can see people of color in their classrooms. That's not the PE teacher and not the custodian.
Yeah. So going to the concept of resident-led policy, because that's what we're doing. That's where we're going with this. And you all are setting the discussion, the stage and the platform for this. And RISE wants to take some of these ideas. We have this recorded, just so you know, and listen to some of our participants who watch these different series, and then work with them in a smaller groups to come up with policies and make recommendations to the county board of supervisors, county education system, and also the city council. So any ideas on how we can do that, and how we can engage with your offices or your organization to make that happen?
So I think I can start with this what council did after the budget, when we were passing the appropriations ordinance, where we did set aside $29 million from the police department budget, and we will be reevaluating that at the mid-year during our budget process. And just we look at the budget in the middle of the fiscal year to see what adjustments need to be made. And most of those adjustments do come from the mayor, but we did do this as a council. And I think that it would be very helpful to get ideas from community members about ways in which that the money can be reallocated. And again, this is something that we are exploring, and that we have to get full support for. But I think it'd be really, really important to get ideas from community members about how to restructure that diverting those and reallocating those funds. I think that would be very, very important. Working with a group now on the surveillance technology things that we are doing. That's very much a community-led effort by a coalition called Trust SD. And that, doing a lot of the background and legwork in that area of, experts and community members. And I say that because our community members are experts on issues, and I don't mean, when I talk about this comparison, I don't mean to say that any ideas are less, especially those that come from our community, because they are rooted in community. We just have to continue to communicate about the political process. Because I think you know, we just need to continue to do that. In order to do that, again, there has to be trust, because the process has not worked for us. So for me to say, well, we need to go through this process, that's hard. That's hard for community members, because when does the process really work for us? Mm-hmm. And so that's, you know, that's always a challenge, but we had to take on that challenge in order to have those community-led policies come forward.
You know, and I saw that you got some criticism, Councilmember Montgomery, about the defund the police. And I thought much of it was unwarranted because, you know, and I don't know if the whole community understood that, and this is no disrespect to anybody who wanted you to defund the police, but there was, you know, being over the budget and dealing with the budget, that started in January, right? The whole process started in January. And so to fundamentally understand the process is really important, because I think folks thought it was a good idea just make the selection of the budget and just put the money somewhere else, but it doesn't always really work that way, does it?
It does not. And there's two things there. And we're talking about how to strengthen Black communities. And there are many people that are willing to help, and that I'm very grateful for that. But what we saw in that backlash also was a lot of anti-Blackness, because there were 8 other council members that voted for the same thing and did not receive the same types of attacks. Right. And so, you know, we have to, as we move forward, we have to make sure that Black voices are centered in this, and that we're not stepping on our own foot, you know, or, you know, like my grandmother said, cut off your nose to spite your face. You know, we have to make sure that we are not doing that. And we have to recognize anti-Blackness when it confronts us, because that was a situation. And disappointment, disagreement, a lot of even my close friends were disappointed and disagreed with me. But that going that extra step, that was, you know, it was interesting to see it play out like that. And the other thing is, it goes back to politics. Councilmember Monica Montgomery cannot defund the police. In a budget time, we need to have at least 6 votes to do that. It's just the way it is. We have a strong mayor system, and it's very important, you know, that be a part of the conversation, not as an excuse, but as a fact.
Mm-hmm. And that's a difficult part of leadership at times. You got to say no to some of your most ardent supporters. And Dr. Ward, you know, being an educator, first of all, education is probably the most difficult issue to address. And I was a teacher for 10 years, and I know how difficult it is. And there's an issue of trust, which I think somebody brought it up. I'm not sure if the council member brought that up or you did, but, you know, there's trust, and the fact that Councilmember Montgomery does, and I know she does, works as hard as she can to advocate for the people that she represents. She might not always do exactly what they say, which is it is impossible to do that. But Dr. Ward, I mean, when it comes to African Americans in the education system, they do not trust in many ways. I don't want to say this in totality, but there's a lot of mistrust when it comes to the education system.
And you know, that's why this gap of Black and brown children at 60+% of our students, and then 60 to 70% of our teachers are white or Asian. And so there's that, it's a disconnect that is not necessarily conscious, but it is what it is. And then there's this issue around our school leadership. I mean, how many Black superintendents are there in 42-3 districts, right? I can't think of one. But I've been away from the county at that county level for about 4 years, but I don't know of one. And so, I mean, out of 40, if even 5%, you should have at least 2. I know math pretty well. And so, you know, so there's that issue. And I think if I were working with if I had the magic wand and I could get the cooperation of the city council and the county and religious leaders, etc., I would focus on making sure we get a representative group of people in our schools that work with our students, one, and make sure they're all culturally responsive and understanding their own biases, because we all have them. I have them, you have them, they're there. But when you understand them, you can help students, to help them with this social emotional learning. But most important and foremost would be the preschool issue. Because I think our kids, you may know this, I started out as a preschool teacher in the inner city in Boston and graduated to kindergarten. And I know that what you can do with a 4 and 5 year old in terms of giving them the basic foundations of math and reading and writing and all of that sets them off for the rest of their lives. And what happens is we don't get enough of that. So by the time they go to our school K-12 system, they're already behind. So if I were working with all of those entities, I'd say, we need this, we need universal access to the internet, we need to make sure our kids get into schools and make sure they get into after school programs and make sure they have the leadership. And by the way, leadership, people of color, is not just for people of color and students. It should be throughout the schools and the districts, because certainly knows it works the other way, so it can work both ways.
Well, I would say that, you know, there's a lot of issues that, as I said, we're recording this. We want to make sure that we get everything. But I did want to mention one thing. And of course, I have to throw a shout out to Howard University. You guys know why she throwing a shout out to Howard University today?
I think so.
So our Democratic vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, went to Howard University, and a product of, I think, Oakland School District, to be honest with you. I think she went to school in Oakland. But what are you know, there is a couple of questions in the chat box on this. What do you all think about that? What's the feeling related to Kamala Harris and how, obviously one person can't change these important issues, but is there an importance of her being the first African-American vice presidential candidate? We know that Shirley Chisholm also ran for president, but what's the significance here?
Well, it's a first, you know, and she's a Black woman. She is the daughter of immigrants as well. And I'm very proud. You know, I know there are a lot of issues around her time as a prosecutor, as top prosecutor, and those will be addressed. But for me, it doesn't take away the magnitude of the moment that we are here, that she is extremely qualified, and that, you know, she has really, really worked very hard. And I will say, just as a woman in these positions, and you opened up with this, Tony, when you talked about Dr. Weber, talked to Dr. Weber about her run. There's a lot of animosity that women face in these positions. And it's sometimes it's not behavior that folks aren't even aware of. And so, you know, we all have to reprogram ourselves and make our expectations equal to, you know, that of the way that we think and act and give reverence to men. And so, you know, for me, it's a proud time. I was going to vote for Joe anyway, but it is even more so that he thought, you know, that they went through this process and chose a Black woman as a vice presidential pick. And so I'm proud. And do I agree with every single thing? Nope, I don't. But at this point, I know that we have two people that are compassionate and that care about people. And right now, that's the bar. And so, so we'll move forward in this historic moment. And I think we should take it for what it is and deal with our issues as we push and hold them accountable, you know, as well.
You know, I haven't worked in 7 years in Compton and the state takeover, and then Oakland and here. I've never in my past thought that just putting people into a position because of their race, qualified or not, is a good idea. But what impresses me most about Kamala Harris is she's darn qualified. And that's what makes me most proud, is that she could very well become the first African-American woman president. And so, and she'd do a great job at it. I hope that she gains more experience as a VP, and that, who knows, maybe in the second term she may be running and Joe may fade off, and so the light at the end of the tunnel, to me, is as important as this first, as Councilmember Montgomery said. That's very important too, but it carries a heavy load. Yeah. And so, it's very likely that in the next term or two, she could become the first African-American woman president.
And the first woman president.
And the first woman president. Thank you. That's right.
Right.
It has been a male-dominated business, isn't it? Like most things.
Yes. So I'm going to give you all an opportunity to kind of finish up. We're going to give you an opportunity to say a few things specifically related to our goal for Sunrise, the Sunrise series, to start engaging residents to write policy and submitting to you, or have somebody like Dr. Ward carry it forward with them. I'd like for you to comment on that, and then and any closing remarks that you might have moving forward.
So we hopefully have been very accessible for a while, and really are community centered. It is harder during this time. One of my promises was that I would be out there, and right now it's tough with COVID, that we've had to change the dynamic a bit, but we are there. You can call us, you can email us. We get all types of calls, and we want to stay community centered and focused for this very reason. We think this is the time that we would push those community policies forward. We're going to continue to do that, especially throughout this year. We already have plans to do that in the reimagining public safety in the city, and the roadmap through that we released about a month ago. And so it's really staying centered in that. I do also want to focus on the economic opportunities. That's extremely important, because I would have this conversation a lot at the ACLU and just say, we want to end mass incarceration without a doubt. If I have folks who are coming out and cannot get housing, cannot get a job, and are restricted that way, then what are we really doing? And so we have to work on these things holistically. Education, huge part of it. That's why I can't tell my parents, oh, that has nothing to do with me. At the very least, I point them in the right direction, because these things they intersect. We have to take a holistic approach, but we are available. District 4 is available. My entire team is available for community ideas. Once we come out of the recess, we'll brainstorm about more ways to do that. But for now, there are coalitions out there that I encourage you to get involved with. And that one is Trust SD. We're doing work with them. We're doing work with another is the Coalition for Police Accountability and Transparency. And we're also, again, digging into those economic issues and really trying to revitalize District 4 while keeping the residents of District 4 in District 4. We don't want to sacrifice our residents for revitalization. We believe that our residents deserve a community and a quality of life that is shared across the city while they still live here in San Diego. And so Monica Montgomery at sandiego.gov, and just, we're open, and just continue to keep in touch with us about your ideas, and we'll find ways to organize those and bring you in as we build this capacity. Like you said, I have nine staff members, and for all that we have to do in our community, that's just not a lot, but we work really, really hard. So show us a little bit of grace, but we're open and we're available to the community.
And Rise will definitely be there to support you. Dr. Ward, before we get to you, I want to talk to Janelle. She's going to give us some insight about how we can engage with Janelle, are you still there? Oh, yeah. So
yeah, I was trying to push unmute instead.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you for still being with us, and I know you're here representing Dr. Weber, but the Black Caucus has ways in which the residents can engage and support some of the things that Dr. Weber talked about. Did you want to share that?
Yes, thank you again for the opportunity, and apologize for Dr. Weber having to get off of the call. So I'm coming from a statewide perspective. I want to thank the fellow panelists and RISE for having Dr. Weber join you. One thing that I would suggest just from a local level is to pay attention to the statewide initiatives, the statewide bills that are coming out, because they are statewide and they will have to come to your city for you all to implement. So not only the local elected officials, but also the residents of the city, pay attention to what is going on at the state level, because there will be an opportunity for you to engage and hold your local folks accountable to implement those issues that are there. And then also stay engaged with your district offices of your elected officials. So just within San Diego, we have Assemblymember Weber, we have Senator Atkins, who is the President Pro Tem. We have Assemblymember Gonzalez, who is chair of the Latino Caucus. And then we have Mr. Todd Gloria. So make sure that you're staying in tune to what those offices are doing. Between the two offices, the Senate and the Assembly, they have tons of events, tons of information for you to use not only in your local community, but also to stay engaged to the statewide efforts that are there. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you, and say again hello to the Assembly member for us. We really do.
Absolutely, will do.
Dr. Ward, any
yeah, tell her to keep up that good work out there.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think that there's lots of good ideas out there in our community, and that people need to follow those ideas and create coalitions around some of their ideas. And some of their ideas, some of them they need to look for others who have the same ideas and the same mission. For example, I'm trying to create more opportunities for Black and brown school leaders. And so rather than trying to create my own entity, I've looked for some of the best nonprofits and others that I'm trying to join together. One of them's RISE, because RISE had a great UPP program, and with all of the good parts about bringing in urban leadership into our schools and education, and trying to marry those with some other resources that we have, whether it's the county office or whether it's other programs. And some of those ideas you don't need to create yourself. You need to get in partnership with others to be able to do that. And I always had this saying that it's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
And so often in our communities, we got to have the credit. So, and so I'm not going to follow you, even though that's what I want to do, but I got to get the credit for it. So I'm not going to give, so we've got to get to the point where we look at our religious leaders, our civic leaders, etc., and look at philanthropy and get together with create coalitions with other folks doing the work. And philanthropy will give if you got the right idea and the savvy to make it happen. So I just want to encourage folks to do that.
And we will follow up on that, and we have some of those ideas too, Dr. Ward. So, first of all, I want to say thank you all for participating. I know how hard you all work. Councilmember Montgomery, I just imagine what your day started like today, and you're still here at, close to 6:30 in the evening. I know you got more stuff to do, but we really do appreciate you, and we really want to be behind you and support some of the ideas that you have. So thank you for being a part of that.
Yes, we do.
And Dr. Ward, you obviously have a little bit of passion that we probably need to turn it up a little bit more. But the bottom line is that I know where your heart is, and you know, some folks don't know you or haven't engaged with you, but it's been a real pleasure to work with you on issues, and I'm looking forward to that in the future.
Thank you.
And the fact that we got Black legislators in Sacramento, and Janelle, sounds like you do a lot of support for them. You know, we need to keep those folks there, right? And the fact that you're, you know, I know what a consultant does in regards to a committee like that, and that's basically everything. And I know
Yes.
that. So we appreciate all of you. And so with that, I'm gonna say thank you. And I think I have a couple other things I have to say to the audience, but that will be my final word to this wonderful panel. We appreciate you. And with that, I think, thank you. With that, I want to make sure that we kind of remind the people who have listened to this podcast that, you know, we are going to continue to have a number of different discussions based on what we heard today. We're going to take what we heard today and we're going to focus in on some of those very important issues, and then we're going to work with residents to come up with ways to support or encourage ideas that will help inform these amazing leaders here. So we want to make sure that you answer this poll questions. This one poll question: overall, how would you rate the event tonight? And you know, you can fill that out. The panelists can't do that, but and then also, how likely would you recommend this event to a friend or colleague? So please fill that out as a feedback survey, and we'd appreciate that. So based on that, I think we have one other thing that we want to show you. Next steps when it comes to our issue. I think we're getting to that now. What I will say is that over the next couple of weeks, we'll have these other discussions. And finally, what we'll have on August 27th, one of the issues that are really important, I think is really important to Councilmember Montgomery, is a discussion on arts and culture and the inequities that happen when it comes to the funding. So Councilmember, if you want to send somebody over to talk on that issue, I have some art and culture folks who are serious about it, and they want to change policy 100-03, which is how they fund arts and culture in the city. So we're going to have that discussion on the 27th. All right. So with that, thank you all. You will have a wonderful evening, and we appreciate you participating with Rise San Diego.